The city buzzed with life, its towering skyscrapers shimmering under the glow of streetlights. From the top floor of a sleek, high-rise, Jonathan Parker, a 55-year-old man, sat in his expansive office. As the CEO of a leading technology corporation, he had built an empire, admired for his sharp mind and strategic vision. Yet, despite his professional triumphs, his personal life was a stark contrast. The luxurious home he shared with his wife, Eleanor Parker, 53, was elegant but devoid of warmth. Eleanor, a woman of deep emotions, longed for a deeper connection with her husband, but years of emotional distance had left her resigned to their reality. Together, they had 2 children, Daniel, 28, a brilliant lawyer, and Sophie, 25, a passionate artist. From the outside, the Parker family seemed perfect, but beneath the surface lay an ever-growing disconnect, one that no one dared to confront. The autumn wind whispered through the streets, golden leaves swirling beneath the dim glow of streetlights. In the spacious yet eerily silent kitchen, Eleanor stirred her cup of chamomile tea, the warmth from the porcelain barely reaching her fingertips, let alone her heart. The front door creaked open. She didn't need to look up to know it was Jonathan. He walked in, his shirt slightly wrinkled from a long day, pressing a fleeting kiss to her cheek. "Evening. Sorry, I got held up in a meeting." Eleanor forced a small smile, suppressing the familiar sting of disappointment. "Would you like me to warm up dinner for you?" "No need. I already ate at the office." Jonathan's voice was detached, his mind elsewhere. He loosened his tie and made his way upstairs, leaving Eleanor alone in the dimly lit kitchen. She watched his silhouette disappear up the staircase, the weight of loneliness pressing against her chest. Upstairs, Jonathan stepped into his study, the soft glow of the desk lamp casting long shadows on the walls. He opened a drawer, sifting through a stack of documents, until his fingers brushed against something unexpected. A faded envelope, its paper worn with age. His breath caught as he recognized the handwriting on the front. "To my dearest Jonathan." His heart clenched. Slowly, he opened the envelope, pulling out a fragile sheet of paper. As his eyes traced the delicate strokes of ink, the world around him seemed to still. "My dearest Jonathan, tonight, I sit on our porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues of orange and gold. In just a few short months, I will be your wife, and even now, I can hardly believe that our dream is becoming a reality. I dream of waking up beside you every morning, of laughter-filled dinners, of adventures we promised to take, but more than that, I dream of a life where love always comes first, where we never let work, duty, or time steal away the things that truly matter. Jonathan, promise me that no matter where life takes us, we will never forget what is most important: each other. Forever yours, Eleanor." Jonathan's grip on the paper tightened, his chest constricting with an ache he couldn't ignore. How long had it been since he last thought about these promises? How long had he let ambition consume him, blind to the one thing that had always mattered most? A wave of regret crashed over him. He had lost sight of what truly mattered. Jonathan sat frozen, his eyes fixed on the old letter. Eleanor's words echoed in his mind, as if the young woman he had once promised the world was whispering to him, reminding him of a dream he had long forgotten. He leaned back in his chair, running a hand down his face. A heavy weight settled in his chest. When had he become this man? A successful, powerful businessman, but also a distant husband, an absent father? For years, he had chased success. Endless meetings, million-dollar contracts, networking events. He had built an empire, but at the cost of empty dinner tables, missed moments, and silent nights. The letter trembled in his grasp. A single question burned in his mind. Was it too late to change? The next morning, when Eleanor woke up, she found a bouquet of wild daisies on the dining table, the same flowers she had held on their wedding day. Next to it was a small note. "I remember." She traced the delicate petals with her fingertips. How long had it been since he had done something like this? That evening, Jonathan came home early, but this time not to bring his laptop and bury himself in work. This time, he came to be present. In his hands was an old poetry book, the kind they used to read together when they were young. When Eleanor saw the book, she hesitated, her eyes searching his face. Jonathan pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "May I read to you?" His voice was steady, but there was a vulnerability in it. For a moment, Eleanor simply stared at him. Then she nodded. Jonathan opened a random page and began to read. The words filled the space between them, bringing back a time when love was effortless, when their dreams had not yet been buried under obligations and routine. That night, for the first time in years, they sat together. No work emails, no ringing phones, just the two of them, and a love they thought had been lost. Jonathan knew that flowers and poetry alone could not erase years of neglect. But it was a start, a first step toward reclaiming the woman he loved, the man he used to be. And he had no intention of stopping now. In the days that followed, Eleanor began to notice a shift. Jonathan wasn't just coming home earlier, he was truly present. The phone calls, the late-night emails, the endless meetings, they no longer consumed him the way they once had. One evening, as Eleanor prepared dinner, Jonathan walked into the kitchen, a small, wrapped box in his hands and a quiet smile on his face. "This is for you," he said, placing it on the counter. Eleanor opened the box. Inside were 2 tickets to a weekend cooking class. She looked up at him, eyes filled with surprise. "We've never really cooked together, have we?" Jonathan said a little sheepishly. "I figured it's about time we try." Eleanor laughed, a real, genuine laugh, not the polite kind she had grown used to giving. "You do realize you can't even boil an egg, right?" "Then you'll just have to teach me," he grinned. The cooking class was a complete disaster. Flour covered the counters, sauces burned, and recipes were all but forgotten. But they laughed. For the first time in a long while, Eleanor felt alive, not just existing. Jonathan didn't stop there. He made time for Daniel and Sophie, asking them about their lives, their passions. For the first time in years, they had a family dinner where no one was in a rush to leave. One afternoon, Jonathan took Eleanor to a quiet park, the very one where they used to spend hours together when they were young. He spread a blanket under an old oak tree, opened a bottle of wine, and simply sat there, watching the world go by with her. "Jonathan," Eleanor's voice was soft, careful. "What's happening? You've changed so much." Jonathan set his glass aside and took her hands in his. "I'm just doing what I should have done a long time ago. I want to be here, with you." Eleanor searched his face, and for the first time in years, she saw not just sincerity, but a love she thought had long faded. That night, as they lay together beneath a sky full of stars, she knew they had found their way back to each other. Life had begun to feel like a second chance, a new chapter filled with warmth, laughter, and love. Eleanor no longer spent her evenings waiting alone, no longer endured empty conversations. Jonathan was truly present, but sometimes as he laughed with her over dinner or held her hand during an evening stroll, a flicker of exhaustion crossed his face. His hands, once steady, would tremble for just a moment before he brushed it off with a smile. Eleanor noticed, but she convinced herself it was nothing. After all, they had just begun again. He listened, he shared, and above all, he loved her, the way he should have all along. For the first time, Eleanor saw a different Jonathan, peaceful, light-hearted, as if he had finally found his way home. She thought, perhaps after all these years, they had finally found each other again. But fate always has its own plans. Jonathan started feeling exhausted. At first, it was just occasional stomach aches, a lingering fatigue. He brushed it off as stress, years of overworking catching up to him. But soon, the pain became sharper, his appetite disappeared, his body visibly thinning. Eleanor noticed immediately. "Jonathan, are you sure you're okay?" she asked, watching him clutch his stomach for the 3rd time that week. "It's just a little indigestion, nothing to worry about." He smiled, but she wasn't convinced. She stepped closer, taking his hand. "No, Jonathan, you know I won't let this go. We need to see a doctor." He hesitated, but seeing the worry in her eyes, he finally relented. "All right, Eleanor, if it will ease your mind." They never expected that doctor's visit to change everything. "Mr. Parker," the doctor's voice was heavy as he placed the test results on the table. "I'm very sorry, you have advanced stage pancreatic cancer." The world tilted. Eleanor felt the air leave her lungs, her ears ringing. She turned to Jonathan, expecting shock, anger, denial, but he sat still, silent. "No, this has to be a mistake," her voice trembled. We just got our life back." Jonathan slowly reached for her hand. It startled her how steady his grip was, firm, unwavering. "Eleanor," his voice was soft, "I'm not afraid." Tears streamed down her face. "How can you not be, Jonathan? We lost so much time, and now this?" He shook his head, a faint smile touching his lips. "No. If this had happened months ago, I would have died, a stranger to my own family. But now I have truly lived." Eleanor broke down, not just for the pain of losing him, but for the years they had wasted. "Then we will face this together," she whispered. Jonathan squeezed her hand, his eyes full of love. "I want to spend my remaining days loving you, loving our family. Nothing else matters anymore." And from that moment on, they chose to see every remaining day not as an ending, but as a gift. From the moment they received the news, life was never the same again, but not in a way that was tragic or despairing. Instead, it became more profound, more meaningful. Jonathan and Eleanor had learned the most valuable lesson of all. Time is fleeting, but love endures. They chose to live each day, not as people counting down the moments, but as people savoring them. On the days Jonathan was strong enough, they did things they had long postponed. They visited the beach, where they had once spent their youthful days, feeling the cool breeze, listening to the waves crash against the shore like the steady rhythm of a peaceful heart. "I wish I had done this sooner," Jonathan whispered. Eleanor squeezed his hand and smiled. "It doesn't matter when, Jonathan. What matters is that we're here now." As he grew weaker, they spent quiet afternoons in their sunlit living room, Eleanor reading to him, poems they once loved, stories that reminded them of who they used to be. Sometimes Jonathan didn't say a word. He simply held her hand. Because sometimes love needs no words. He also made sure to say the things he had left unsaid. Daniel, who had always admired his father's achievements, now realized that some things mattered more than success. "I always wanted to be like you," he admitted, his voice trembling. "But now I see that success isn't measured by what we accomplish, but by the love we give." Jonathan placed a firm hand on his son's shoulder, pride shining in his tired eyes. "I never wanted you to follow in my footsteps. I only wanted you to find what truly matters." With Sophie, Jonathan spent time admiring her paintings. "I never told you this, but I have always been proud of you." She broke down in tears, collapsing into his arms. "I wish we had more time." Jonathan stroked her hair, his voice a whisper. "You have given me a life full of color, Sophie. That is more than enough." One late afternoon, as the family gathered together, Jonathan gazed at them all. His expression held no fear, no regret, only love and peace. "All my life I thought success was in wealth, in numbers, in recognition, but now I see that true success is the people sitting here with me." Eleanor grasped his frail hand, tears slipping onto his fingers. Daniel and Sophie moved closer, wrapping their arms around their father. In that moment, they were no longer a family once divided by distance and time. They were a love that nothing, not even death, could erase. Because death does not take love away, it only makes it eternal. Jonathan's final days were filled with love. Eleanor never left his side, holding his hand whenever he grew weak, whispering love into his ear. She refused to let fear or sorrow steal these last precious moments. One winter night, as snow blanketed the world outside, Eleanor sat beside Jonathan's bed, resting her head against his arm. She listened to the faint rhythm of his breathing, felt the slowing beat of his heart beneath her fingers. "Jonathan," she whispered. His eyes fluttered open, clear as the stars in the midnight sky. A soft smile touched his lips. "I'm here, Eleanor." She bit her lip, fighting the tears threatening to spill. "Are you afraid?" Jonathan gazed at her, his expression calm, unwavering. "No, because I am not leaving alone. I have you. I have our family. And I know our love will never fade." Tears slipped from Eleanor's eyes, landing on his fragile hand. She held him tighter, as if she could hold on to his warmth a little longer. "I love you, Jonathan, more than anything in this world." Jonathan's smile lingered. A deep breath, then softer and softer still, until the room fell into stillness. Eleanor did not scream or wail. Instead, a profound stillness took over her as she leaned forward, pressing a final kiss to his forehead. His skin was still warm, but she knew that warmth was fading, slipping away from her grasp like grains of sand through her fingers. She laid her head gently on his chest, listening, hoping, praying for just one more heartbeat. Silence. A sob broke free from her lips, raw and aching, as she whispered through her tears, "Wait for me, Jonathan. Somewhere, someday, I will find you again." In the years that followed, Eleanor did not live in sorrow. She lived in love. She carried Jonathan's lessons in her heart, that life was not about counting days, but making every day count. One afternoon, as the golden sunlight poured through the window, Eleanor found the old letter again. She traced her fingers over the faded ink, remembering the girl who had written these words so full of hope. The girl who had believed in a love that would never fade. And she had been right. This letter was no longer a reminder of what was lost. It was proof of what had been found, of a love that had endured beyond time, beyond loss. With a quiet smile, she placed it in a frame and hung it in Jonathan's study, a silent vow that love never truly disappears. It only transforms into memory, into light, into something eternal, living on in the hearts of those who remain. And so their love never truly ended.